I hate to say it, but crime, at least cybercrime, does pay. $2 billion in lifetime revenue for one of the most sophisticated malware and ransomware operators in the history of e-crime. Today we're talking about who they are, how they operate, and the tactics and techniques they have used to generate that billion with a B dollar number in their nefarious history. Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Seth with Seth on Security, where we talk about cybersecurity topics that can be kind of technical and try to break them down into simpler pieces. And then we talk about some of the implications and applications to our daily lives. If that's something that you find interesting, please like the video, please subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know what you'd like to see. So let's talk about these guys. They go by many names: Miner, Fin12, UNC1878. But their most famous name was given to them by the security research firm CrowdStrike. Wizard Spider. A high-profile, big-game hunter e-crime group, these guys gained infamy with the distribution and operation of the TrickBot malware. We'll talk about specifically how TrickBot works and how cool it is, I guess, how it's managed to be so successful. This infamous malware has infected somewhere around 1 million systems in its tenure. Its major function was originally just the theft of banking details and other credentials, but its operators have extended its capabilities to create a complete modular malware ecosystem. Wizard Spider is a Russian group, with some members potentially being based in the Ukraine. It's estimated around 100 individuals are in the group. The group employs skilled computer programmers on a part-time and temporary basis, and their model involves regular changes in staff. Imagine that. The Conti group, which is a ransomware that was developed by Wizard Spider, even has an HR person on their permanent staff. Wizard Spider does not target attacks to any Russian entities or individuals, and key members don't leave the country. It's thought that by giving Russian targets a pass, they're allowed to continue their operations while law enforcement turns a blind eye to their activities. And they take this very seriously. So much so that the code they use in their malware is programmed to uninstall itself if it locks onto a Russian language system or any systems featuring an IP address in the former Soviet Union. Now generally, Wizard Spider is a for-profit crime syndicate. However, they're also suspected of working on behalf of Russian authorities. They lend their infrastructure and their cyber expertise to carry out state-backed attacks on Russia's enemies. It wouldn't be much of a surprise if they had taken part in some of the current political situations. With the current political situation between Russia and Ukraine, Wizard Spider has already stated that they will retaliate against anyone that attacks Russia and fully stands behind them. So now that we know who they are, let's talk a little bit about how they operate and get into some of the meaty stuff in the malware. It's really interesting. Well, simple enough, these guys are out for money. And right now in cybercrime, the best way to make money is to use ransomware. Wizard Spider has very effective ransomware. That's kind of their bread and butter. Not only that, but they go for big targets. The term BGH has been used to describe their targeting. It's short for big game hunting. Analyst One, a company who produced a white paper on, quote, ransomware cartels, believes that the Wizard Spider gang is broken up into several teams. Each of these teams facilitates its ransom operation involving Ryuk and Conti ransomwares. Those are two variants of ransomware that we'll talk about. Now, this group is ruthless. They are criminals. Make no mistake about it. We're talking about a group who, after taking patient records from a hospital and installing ransomware on their systems, emailed individual patients and threatened to publish their therapy and mental health treatment records if they were not paid. Obviously, the patients cannot pay the ransom for the hospital, so this was used as a tactic to pressure the hospital to pay the ransom. Now, Interestingly, ransomware and malware sellers often prohibit the attacking of certain targets like hospitals and other critical infrastructure for a variety of reasons. They're high profile and innocent people depend on them. But not these guys. That's a lowball move right there. They're also very good at what they do. The malware they've written, TrickBot, is a very versatile and modular Trojan that's really the orchestrator of later stages and more consequential attacks. TrickBot is what leads to the group's bread and butter, ransomware. The TrickBot malware is, well, tricked out. It's got lots of features. Here's a few of them. Intercepting activity related to banking websites and browsers, a password stealer, domain controller information stealing, a custom remote administration tool, and it can grab emails from Outlook and send spam through Outlook using MAPI. And with the mail spam, it also removes traces of spamming by deleting emails from the Outlook sent items folder. Isn't that awesome? Now, TrickBot is really cool and all, but the big cheese is what comes next. Ransomware installation. See, TrickBot, it's not ransomware, but it knows how to download it and run it. Now, starting back with Ryuk in 2016 and continuing with the Conti ransomware today, Wizard Spider uses these variants that they've authored for their attacks. Now, we're not going fully into the technical details on these ransomwares, but I will give a couple of highlights and how these variants stand out and things that make them really effective as ransomware. So the first thing is that these ransomwares encrypt very fast. And I want to talk a little bit about how that happens because I think it's really interesting. Here's an example from Ryuk. When a victim is infected with the Ryuk ransomware, it first creates multiple copies of itself, at least of the executable. It can then use these additional hidden executables to spawn additional instances of itself, which will then speed up the encryption process, so more of them is better for that. Another speed boost that Ryuk receives is through process injection. Now, process injection is a fairly complicated process that we don't really need to fully flesh out here, but just know that it means that a malicious process is essentially packing its code into a legitimate one in the computer's memory. Now, this makes it look like the legitimate process, it makes the malicious process look legitimate, and it can run its malicious code. So, Ryuk injects another copy of its original process, and so it can get another thread when performing encryption, and it makes it that much faster. One analyst test found that files were encrypted within a matter of 120 seconds or so on a 50 gigabyte drive. Man, malware really fascinates me. Copying itself, moving itself around, making itself persistent and hard to get rid of. So interesting. One other interesting note and a bit of a troll from the Ryuk authors, it also runs this command here. Yeah, this command looks pretty simple, and I guess it is. It kills the audio endpoint builder Windows service. Now, this causes audio to malfunction on the victim system. I don't know why this command is there other than to basically troll and enrage the victim of the ransomware. Now, you may be wondering, well, how can criminals, get these very effective tools? Well, people like you and me, we can't. Now, there are many tools that anyone could go and purchase from a hacking forum or underground forum, and they even have support channels and can be directly purchased by people like me and you. But these big guns that these guys have, not so much. Wizard Spider's malware and tools are not openly advertised on criminal forums, which indicates that they likely only sell access to or work with trusted criminal groups, and these groups have been previously established. This also speaks to their security practices and operational security and staying away from law enforcement. It makes them that much harder to track. All right, so let's talk about some of the tactics and the techniques that Wizard Spider uses. Now, we've talked a little bit about their tools, and we see how kitted out they are. They really have all the tools that they need to get down and dirty and get what they want. Money. So, Up here, this is an attack, or how an attack would work with one of their ransomwares. You can see the first step, the initial infection vector, is one of three things. Now, the thing that I have seen the most in my experience is phishing emails. The phishing emails will contain URLs. The URLs will download malware. The malware in this case is Emotet. Emotet is a malware that can be used to install TrickBot, and TrickBot, that's our ticket. So the phishing email that you've clicked has downloaded Emotet. Emotet conducts a lot of system profiling and reconnaissance. It collects a lot of information about the computer, like its usernames, its operating system, and it sends it back to the command and control server. Then it downloads TrickBot. TrickBot runs in memory. It injects into those legitimate processes, and it tries to avoid detection. It maintains persistence, or attempts to, by creating a scheduled task so that if the computer is turned off, it will restart. Remember some of the modules we talked about earlier? Well, it uses the credential theft module to grab credentials on the computer. TrickBot will also collect email, associated files, and messages and send them back to the command and control server. This diagram doesn't directly show TrickBot doing that, but you can be assured that it is happening in the background. Then TrickBot downloads the Ryuk ransomware. Now it gets really interesting. The Ryuk ransomware payload uses this Wake on LAN capability, LAN, to identify other hosts. Essentially what this Wake on LAN does, it's sending out packets to these systems to wake them up. Note here that the ransom payload hasn't necessarily started encrypting the victim's files yet, but the ransomware is spreading. Now, after it has spread throughout the environment everywhere that it can by poking around the network, looking for places to go, and then replicating itself onto those systems, then the ransom payload is executed, the victim's data is encrypted, all throughout the environment, and you have a real mess on your hands. And that is finally when the ransom note appears in your environment. One part not included in this kill chain is RAS, or Ransomware as a Service. This is an entire video in itself, and I'm saving it later for its own topic. Stay tuned. So that's an example attack. Now, how does Wizard Spider get people to pay? Well, they have a few extortion techniques. We talked about the one earlier where, after infecting a hospital with ransomware, they contacted individual patients whose data they had actually stolen. These extortions are broken down in cybersecurity terms here, and that example would be a quadruple extortion technique. A single extortion technique would be just encrypting the files, asking for the ransom. The double extortion is when you've taken data out of the victim's environment and you are threatening to leak the data. The triple extortion is essentially using a DDoS attack and further denying the service to the victim when they don't pay the ransom. And then the quadruple extortion is the one we had just mentioned. Something else, ransomware operators really want the victims to pay. Conti, for example, facilitates this through a little bit of a disguise with a technical support staff to talk to the target. And this is a dedicated staff member. It could be a factor that could make them more likely to pay by being so nice to provide them the service. Yet another tactic from Wizard Spider is actually shame and embarrassment. On its leak site, Wizard Spider issues press releases that are designed to humiliate the companies that they have attacked and trying to extort. It actually includes a wall of shame where companies are nominated for the Hull of the Month or Clown of the Month, and during which they're generally taunted with insults and name-calling. Not a place that you want to see your organization, that is for sure. Alright, and before we wrap up, I wanted to just show a quick example of a heist, or attempted heist, that this group has claimed responsibility for. This attack involves the HSE, or Health Service Executive of Ireland. That's the country's publicly funded healthcare system under the Irish Department of Health. They have 54 public hospitals which utilize a national IT infrastructure. On March 18th, 2021, an unsuspecting HSE employee opened a phishing email and clicked on a malicious Microsoft Excel document. Well, guess what this did? This did exactly what we had described. The hacker's intrusion remained undetected for 8 weeks. Remember, it doesn't mean that the ransomware was not there, it's simply that the ransomware payload was not executed. During that time, it was being propagated throughout the environment. May 14th, 2021 comes around about 2 months later, and Conti ransomware is everywhere. The hackers demanded a $19 million ransom in exchange for providing the decryption keys for the servers. Now, this one ends, I guess, somewhat on a good note, as they gave the keys to the HSE without requiring the payment. But when they found out about this, they shut down all of their systems throughout Ireland to prevent the malware from spreading further. This forced facilities to revert to paper-based processes and caused widespread delays and service disruptions. The HSE refused to pay the ransom and instead turned to Ireland's National Cybersecurity Center for assistance. Now, it still took, even though Conti provided the decryption keys without receiving the ransom, they still took until September of 2021 to finish decrypting the servers. That's a long time to get everything, absolutely everything, up and running. It's estimated that the entire recovery cost the HSE around $600 million. Well, to wrap up, these are the big baddies. I would not expect these guys and their operations to cease anytime soon, especially if ransoms continue to be paid. For the Ryuk ransomware alone, it's estimated that the group has brought in over $150 million since 2018. Meanwhile, Conti has been able to bring in an estimated $2 billion in revenue. Billion with a B. Now sure, all of that is not taken as profit from the ransomware authors or ransomware sellers, and we'll talk about why that is in another video. But that is a huge sum of money. The only way to truly stop ransomware is, well, to not pay the ransom. Unfortunately, the problem is, as we've just seen, it's really hard to do that. If it was easy, Conti would not have made $2 billion. Another hard thing to deal with is that these guys don't really seem to have that much of a moral compass based on their history. It seems to be well within their reach to make some major rifts in healthcare, critical infrastructure, and major governments. Now, time will tell if this will affect you and me, but time is also on their side. Unfortunately, the weakest link in cybersecurity is the people in the chairs. And as long as we are doing the work, there's room to exploit and plunder for them.